coffee?
We all have
Well
prepared.
Oh, and I love these things in my bag.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Jill Martin, President of the University of North America. Let me start by telling you a story. In 1957, a young captain in the Air Force from the Republic of China went through a stringent selection process and got the opportunity to train at the training center school in Montgomery, Alabama. And that young man cannot forget that life-changing experience, and that was all he talks about throughout his life. That young man was my father, right here, and that picture was taken here at the school. So I'm really, really honored to have this opportunity to come back here 62 years after my father was here. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. And today, I'm here with my team from the University of North America. University of North America is a young and innovative university. We were founded on the basis of applied learning. So our foundation is to connect the education with industry. Not only we design our curriculum that way, our faculty is also well qualified academically as well as with industry expertise. So now I would like to turn over the presentation to Dr. and General Russell Woodard. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, folks. It's really great to be back in Alabama. I grew up 30 miles to the east of Birmingham, Alabama, in a little place called Amiens, Alabama. And it's good to be back where everybody understands how I speak. And they don't think I'm from a foreign country. Last week I was in Korea and Japan and nobody understood me, and I wasn't sure why, but I understand. It's really a great privilege for me to come and talk to you guys today. I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing, having been in 34 years in the Army and then 10 years in the corporate world. You don't see very many of these, and I thank you for that, whoever organized it. I think it's a really great thing. At this point, what I really want to talk about a little bit is the uniqueness of the University of North America. Most of us senior folks not only have some position in the University of North America, but we own our own company. So we bring that expertise to the University of North America. Some of us are teachers, and I'll introduce a couple of those. I happen to be their Vice President of Innovation. I also teach for the University of Maryland Strategy and Leadership in their MBA program. And I have my own company, IT infrastructure, IT programming, IT custom software, managed services, and consulting. Currently working in the VA and the Army. We also have with us today Ken Fang, and Ken is our professor for technology, innovation, computer science, and entrepreneurship. Ken, you want to tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, so part of the faculty at University of North America, as well as I run my own company, Mobomo. We do mobile web cloud, so NASA.gov, USA.gov, USGS, a lot of the kind of public-facing as well as back-end systems for like mobile applications for the VA and that sort of thing. So talk about how, we help train and teach the workforce how to move into kind of a culture shift of agile, like you guys kind of mentioned.
We're also lucky to have with us today Kelly Dunning. He does a lot of work with veterans, and he'll tell us he's a professor for telecommunications, and also owns his own company.
Hello, everyone. Kelly Dunn started my career in the Army, was enlisted and did the Green and Gold program. In my civilian life, I worked for AT&T and Bell Labs. Helped start a company called One Point Communication. We were Verizon Communications' first acquisition. So I had a leadership position in Verizon for 5 years. Did a lot of the early broadband wireless. And then in 2005, myself and the CEO of the business unit from Verizon started Digital Bridge Communications. We launched the first 4G network in the U.S., raised about $100 million, launched 15 markets, and it was a blast. And so from that point, after we sold that company, I ran a global nonprofit for 2 years, got involved in some nonprofit and kind of digital divide work. And then in 2012, I really spent the last 8 years, 7 years doing what I'm doing now. I really did two things in 2012. So first is I started Innovation, which is my company today. But at the same time, there was a huge need in the telecom industry. We were deploying networks, and we couldn't find the right kind of people to climb towers and deploy all this new technology. And I had the bright idea that the military, being a former Signal Corps guy, would be great. The only drawback there is I found out the infantry and combat arms and the non-Signal Corps guys were better in doing it than the Signal Corps guys. But we basically set it up ourselves, incubated it inside a company, and launched it at the White House in 2013. And that became Warriors for Wireless. So Warriors for Wireless is the first wireless industry initiative. I'm now the chairman of the board. We brought in a retired two-star general from the Air Force to run Warriors for Wireless. And I'm back at Innovation full-time and also heavily involved in the University of North America on this new hybrid education model. Because as you'll hear in my piece, I think the future is all about this workforce development, this national warrior workforce, and we've really spent a lot of time understanding this earn while you learn concept and getting the transitioning veterans employed in the fields they not only want to be in, but can excel in, with the right conventional education and leadership. So really excited to be here and talk through this with you guys.
Again, we appreciate the opportunity. We'd rather this be a discussion, so if you've got something along the way, please jump in. It won't hurt my feelings if you jump in and correct it. Probably give me a break to regather my thoughts. All right, do you know which one of these?
Turn it on. Turn it aside.
Where's it?
Right here.
There we go. Great. Thank you. University of North America is an institution that has outstanding leadership, faculty, and students, purposefully located with a vast talent pool of veterans, government, corporate, and community leaders. University of North America is a perfect blend of student, faculty, and government and civic leaders, providing for an open, collaborative, and capable environment, enabling technology and innovation to secure our future. We'll cover more of these topics later in our file. Ken?
So one of your first questions was kind of talking about, faster and more efficient ways to do legacy modernization. Our company as a mobile web cloud-based company, and also the university has based all of their technologies as well in these particular technologies. We really kind of see three things that are all the facets that have to kind of move together. So the first is kind of a process. As a technology company leader, I know that there's a lot of people that immediately jump in and want to implement the technology. But what we've seen as one of the pain points and difficulties is if you don't look at your process and try to optimize your process first, you can do a really good job at making bad processes a lot faster and a lot more automated. So we kind of call that the human in the loop focus, right? So that means that you really have to kind of take a look at your actual implementation processes and systems and see whether they need to be reinvented prior to implementing some of these things. At the same time, then we implement basically the processes, the tools. So that's Agile, DevOps, really DevSecOps at this point in time, where you have to integrate your security, especially at a federal agency, and then all the new tools, right? So before you can even kind of talk about, well, should we do cloud, should we do mobile, containerization, data lakes, all this kind of stuff, whatever, you want to look at your processes and your people, get them trained up, and then implement kind of a CI/CD process or whatever. Now, University of North America has two main programs that probably would apply to this. One is obviously a cybersecurity program where we have a lab that they are constantly doing hands-on exercises with industry to secure networks. At the same time, we have a big data lake initiative where they're working with Splunk Hadoop, Cloudera, or whatever to go ahead and implement these new technologies.
Can I stop you real quick? Sorry.
Sure.
Cybersecurity on the network side, or do you also get into application level cybersecurity?
So both, mostly
both.
on the application, on the network layer.
So it's network defense, not necessarily
But also, yeah, no, application security as well.
vulnerability analysis.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And that's one of the things that we kind of talked about, like, as kind of like why, and it's not just us, obviously, industry is moving towards this DevSecOps, right? So as we move to the cloud, and we got into the DevOps of being able to do continuous deployment, basically ephemeral type infrastructure, that also then enabled us to integrate into the CI/CD process all the security, right? So as opposed to doing agile sprints of 2 weeks of just doing development and then doing all your security scanning and your penetration, your vulnerability analysis and all that kind of stuff, we bake it into the process such that, in say like a Jenkins CI/CD pipeline, you're actually doing SonarQube scans, 4 to 5 scans, whatever it may be, to embed that as part of your application.
I read our playbook, I think. No, I mean, you're using every acronym and term that you know about, so I'm excited.
Okay. Yeah. So, and that's the one nice thing that I like about, being part of University of North America is that, we're bringing in actual industry practices. So we're doing this for the VA, we're doing this for NASA, we're doing it for international trade. We're actually implementing these techniques as part of our process or whatever. So not only can I use the acronyms, but I can also tell you what's difficult about doing them and, how we try to, because a lot of it, like we said here, it's not as much about the technologies, it's actually about the culture shift and the training that has to happen, right? Because, too often you get in there and people be like, okay, well, where do I FTP my files? And you're like, well, we kind of don't do that anymore, right?
So let me ask you a question there. So you said you work with the VA and other large organizations.
Yep.
We're 2,400 people, 150 apps, depending on how you count. Culture's killing me. I'm wondering if you've had success in dealing with organizations and organizational change at that level, or is it small?
Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely at that level.
It's kind of like the aircraft area. You don't turn it around right away.
I was fortunate to run the CRISP program for the VA, which was 700 people, and the CRISP program for the VA was their cybersecurity program. And we literally, a larger part of that program was change management. And we literally, it's hard. It's hard because some don't want to receive it. They're comfortable in their zone. They don't want to get out of it. But in order to succeed, you got to do that change management. It starts at the top with everybody buying in, and then you get all your leaders to buy in, and it works. But if you're thinking that way, you're well ahead of some of the other agencies about the culture of changing things, the shift that you have to take. And I would tell you, you're way ahead. And if you're willing to get into it, you'll be successful.
So we have 3 groups of people, in my opinion. You got guys that ran off the ledge because somebody said it's innovative and go run off the ledge. I'll do it, right? Then there's that group that's watching to see what happened to the guy that just ran off the ledge. And then there's a group of folks that say, I'm not running anywhere, right? So we're trying to, you got cultural bias, you've got age differences, you've got different groups of people trying to cooperate. As you guys are talking through this, the challenges that I'm looking for some help with is how do we bridge that gap? Where do we get the change management to take root to do all the things we're talking about? We're great at throwing the buzzwords on the chart, just like I see here, right? But we've got enough that are early adopters to keep it moving, but I'm not sure we're.
So I can throw out a couple of things. I mean, obviously, like these are just our experiences or whatever that may be. But one is start with an early success, right? A low-hanging fruit, something that's small, right? You don't want to boil the ocean or whatever, right? And get that one, kind of launched as an exemplary project, right? And then that allows people to see like, oh, hey, this is what we could do. Like, so the benefits of moving towards this kind of agile DevSecOps cloud, infrastructure, software-defined network, whatever, the new buzzwords are, is the speed of delivery, right? Is the fact that all of a sudden, like, people don't have to wait 6 months to a year to get a new feature, right? And then there's all this kind of like clamoring of like, oh, we got to get our features in before they stop the, do the next release or whatever. Once people get in this whole thing of like, oh, geez, wait, we're deploying a prod every week. So if I didn't get it in this week, I'm getting it next week, right? So you start with a very, very small thing so you can show a win, it's a test case, all that kind of stuff or whatever, right? And then you have to follow it up. Like, that's why we talk about training so much, right? Like, you have to kind of create this, because there are the folks that are stuck in the legacy that do want to learn new things, right? But then they don't want to be like, oh, well, those are the cool kids. How come I'm not part of the cool kids, right? So you have to create, so what we did over at NASA is we created basically a community of interest, right? Where we would hold sessions every month and teach them, GitHub, teach them, Jenkins, teach them, right? And these were just open sessions. And then once people started, this was mostly around cloud migration at the time. So we migrated roughly 150 applications into an environment called West Prime. And then eventually what happened that was really cool was we created this community of interest, and then the people that had the success, it wasn't just us, right? It's the people that we trained started moving their workloads into the cloud or whatever. They started being the ones to present, right? So they're presenting to their peers, and they're feeling good because like, oh, I implemented Elasticsearch, and I no longer have to pay for these Google appliances, and everything is in the cloud, and it's open source, and all this kind of stuff. And then they're teaching their lessons learned or whatever. So you create this kind of community around that constant learning, and that's what's going to pull, kind of the server huggers out of there. You know what I mean? Because they're, the other piece is that we also learned in implementing, this was also on the commercial side, is that as kind of that catalyst for change, you don't want to like implement everything and then say, hey, this is what you should be doing, right? In many cases, we would create almost like a software toolkit, an SDK, right? It wasn't complete, but we said like, hey, here's this technology, right? Whether it's like, okay, maybe it's Alexa voice skill, right? Maybe it's an Internet of Things, maybe it's a mobile, you know what I mean? But it's just a toolkit, and then you put it into the business units, right? And say, hey, we kind of created this authentication toolkit or whatever it is, so you don't have to worry about single sign-on, right? Like, now you go ahead and implement stuff or whatever, right? And then they own it, as opposed to like, oh, we built this system for you. Go ahead and implement it or whatever, right? Because the whole goal is to kind of create this culture shift, you know what I mean? Such that people embrace it and it's not you pushing it on them, kind of thing. So that's, again, some of the lessons learned that we had, implementing some of these in large organizations. Just as a kind of, you had mentioned kind of robotics, autonomous solutions, that sort of thing. We do have pockets of that. I can't say that, University of North America has like a robotics program like we do with the data labs and the cybersecurity lab. But we have done that. We're doing robotic process automation for some state-level healthcare enrollment. We also did, as I mentioned, kind of some Alexa voice skills. We did a chatbot for U.S. Geological Survey that has some natural language processing. And also for NIH, we've done kind of big data, AI, machine learning kind of stuff for analysis of large data sets of text.
In a previous life, I did RPA for Commerce. We were running Commerce HR cradle to grave, onboarding to retirement. Many of those processes, as some of you may know, there's multiple pieces of paper that you've got to have to bring to bear to do an award for a civilian, to do a PCS move or whatever. We took that, and I'll talk about awards just specifically. There were 9 different websites you had to go to get all the information that you needed. And that took a whole bunch of people to get that done in order to keep the backlog down. We did an RPA process, took 9 of those, click one button, they all come up on the screen. So RPA is great. You got to understand it, and you got to make sure that your people understand that because we're doing an RPA process doesn't mean we're eliminating people. a lot of the bad news about RPAs is that, oh, they're gonna come in, they're gonna streamline our processes, we're not gonna have a job, so they're not gonna cooperate. It goes back to the culture issue, right? So you have to do it in a way that everybody feels good about it on the other side.
So I guess the last thing before we move to the next slide is, that's kind of why I like, how the university works, tying it with industry, because the people in the university, the students, can actually get hands-on experience with real world examples, right? It's not just exercises in a classroom.
Quick question for you before you move on. You said you were working some, I guess, task or some function for you said the state health department in regards to robotics. What some of the, I guess, issues that you kind of came across when you first started to endeavor into that project?
So the particular thing that we worked on, because, as Rusty will tell you, there are large vendors like UiPath, Automate Anywhere, or whatever, that do a lot of this robotic process, OCR, scanning, all that kind of stuff, whatever. The largest issue that we had in the state agencies were they got a lot of faxes of forms that people filled out by hand, driver's licenses, whatever that may be. They're all coming in rotated and that sort of thing. Now, the issue with faxes is that by default, most of them are only 200 DPI. Okay, so most of these scanning software packages are expecting, like, I'm going to scan it, therefore it's 300 DPI plus, right? So we were having a lot of, so that's where we actually had to build out an AI using, Scikit and Tesla. I'm not the dev anymore. In order to do handwriting recognition, right? So it basically, the first step was, okay, I get a fax in thing, document identification, right? Is it, a license? Is it their social security card? Then it was basically you had to get it so that it was straight, right? And then you had to identify, the key, social security number, the name, or whatever it is, that then went into the system. Similar with the health forms, it was kind of like initially we would only do the boxes, you know what I mean? And we trained, like it was just handwriting recognition. And you would think that this was an already done thing, but it's not. And also with the states, I mean, some of the difficulty is that even though we have a single engine that will do all of this, the states won't share the data. Right? It's too proprietary, PII, even though it's just like, hey, I'm just identifying a character in a box. So we did have to do training for every single state in order to kind of get this. But that was the key piece, because most of the larger packages could deal with the typical kind of form scanning or whatever. So it was this last 20% that we were trying to automate as part of our project.
I can be the human cooker. Maybe the very best.
See, it wasn't me after all.
Really, we're technology.
One thing I would share with you while they're trying to sort that out, and we'll talk about it later, is several of us are SDVOSB and HubZone. So it gives you an avenue to get to us in a way that many can't. Ken?
Oh, here's the next one. So as we talked about, like one of our larger labs is around kind of network security. And we interpreted this to be obviously your physical networks. We also do a lot of knowledge management type systems and that sort of thing that we can talk about if necessary. But basically, these are, I'm not going to read them all, but these are kind of the key risks that could attack any network. Some of the things that we teach are basically, at a high level, network segmentation, right? Obviously, breaking up your networks into who can access what. Having cold reserve networks or software-defined networks, right? Something at the side that's not being used, that if there's a network attack, you can fail over to it. Obviously, using virtual private networking to access systems. keeping everything encrypted on the network. For crazy things like an electromagnetic pulse, being able to use fiber optic that's not as susceptible to heritage cages or shielding. Triple redundancy, right? So basically kind of a voting system for networks so that you can make sure that you have at least 3 redundant. Some of the things that we started dabbling in, obviously blockchain is the buzzword or whatever, but blockchain control critical network software, right? It's an immutable ledger, so you should have a good, configuration management if you use something like a blockchain that you can see. And then your standard things is, user policy, standardization across the networks, role-based access, that sort of thing. So not rocket science, but like again, hands-on stuff that our guys do in the network.
Work in RMF, work with NIST publications, those type of standards.
Yeah, a lot of it is standards and that sort of thing or whatever. I have to admit, networking is not my expertise. That's another guy, John, so that was more his slide.
Yeah, another profession.
Do you know if there's any AI and network continuous monitoring or things like that?
We do.
Cybersecurity.
Yes, we have a cybersecurity lab or network security lab. And we use multiple applications for students to practice those applications. I can't name all of them, but we have a group of professors who are in that area.
Going back to your comment about how you change culture, this works as well doing that. Our strategy is to listen to the voice of the user and the client. I think often that's missed. You get the voice of maybe the client, but not the user. Sometimes you get the voice of the user and not the client. Sometimes those don't actually meet what the user wants and what the client or the owner wants. It's 2 different things. So we try to make sure that we listen to both. And then we try to ensure an open and non-competitive culture that ensures information sharing with all stakeholders. That's an easy thing to say on paper, but it's a hell of a lot harder. Forgive me for saying that. It's a heck of a lot harder in the real world. We know that, but we've accomplished that across many organizations, and we can do that fairly well. And lastly, is to ensure flexibility through the agile development and continuous client interaction. Agile brings the client to the table more often than you do in the firm fixed price type environment or the waterfall environment, but the flexibility you get with Agile, make sure that you're listening to the user, make sure you're listening to the client, and it has worked extremely well in the environments we've been in.
So you dealt with more Agile-like contracting methodologies, Allison, is that a fair assessment?
It's fair.
One of the things we're also kind of struggling with, in my opinion, right now, I'm not a contracting officer, but these guys are going to come along we've been doing contracting the same way for a very long time. Right? Firm fixed price, cost plus. I mean, name the value, name the flavor, right?
Yep.
We're really starting to rethink the way that we want to approach, especially from an Agile perspective. Right? So we keep getting told that you can't incentivize when you do Agile. Agree or disagree?
I think it's doable.
Okay.
I mean, it would probably be unique to industry, but I think we could come up with a fair for both sides. I think.
Part of our, go ahead, I'm sorry. We're used to base plus 5.